Good morning, people.
Good morning.
It is June 17th, Father's Day weekend. Jay, are you a dad?
Yes, I am.
You said that before.
I've got 2 kids. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there.
Happy
All you
Father's Day.
FPL fathers.
Yes.
Just remember to keep your priorities straight and make sure you manage your team well.
You mean your team at home,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I mean your team
Yeah.
your family team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're both fathers here. We
Yeah.
can appreciate that.
We talked about the hierarchy in fantasy baseball last week or 2 weeks ago, and there's a hierarchy in life as well, right? You've got
Absolutely.
God, family, country. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up now.
Yeah,
Just
I
throwing
know.
stuff
I
in
know.
at the
I
end.
know. I know.
Like, what comes after that?
So,
Jesus, the Cubs, and H2O. That's all I need in this
man, we
life.
can do a whole show off random shit. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Like this Def Leppard shirt you're wearing.
Well, we are the fantasy baseball advocates because we want to promote health and wellness for your fantasy team, but of course in life as well. And that's part of who we are, I think, as nurses. When you become a nurse, you become focused on you understand health and wellness much more.
You become an advocate.
Yes.
For mental, physical
Absolutely.
health.
Yes.
And in mental and physical health, for us, we need to digest and consume our fantasy baseball knowledge.
And what can upset your mental health more than a bad run in fantasy baseball or insecurity about your team?
Ooh,
I mean,
is there
play? Is there anything more unsettling and disturbing than having your roster be in shambles or something like that?
Here we go, guys. All right, so this is going to be a more league-centric show. Jay's got some finishing touches on some roster construction notes, but that was a little playoff, what you're going to get to later. We are officially halfway through the season, and now, unlike the amateur contender versus pretender podcast we threw out back in March, or whenever that was, now we got some real data to go off of. So if you're listening out there, it's for you guys in the Fantasy Premier League and otherwise. Enjoy this show. Jay, can you talk to them just about I don't think we need to summarize stuff we said 2 weeks ago, but you maybe bring them into what you're trying to pull together here.
Yeah, we don't maybe need to rehash everything, but you brought up so many good points last time. I mean, and about, depth of starting pitching and volume of starting pitching, and on the depth, tip, there's you could think of hitting similarly as far as having depth, I think, so we talked about a little bit that we're in a deep league, right? That's who we are as fantasy baseballers. I've always been in a 16-team league. Now we even have 26-man rosters. So the no stone unturned philosophy is a lot of how I've developed as a fantasy baseballer. And you talked a little bit about yourself in the last podcast and what resources you use. I didn't really go into much detail about how I do things. I mean, we were just talking about a second ago, the biggest development in me, I think, as a fantasy baseballer, I mean, yes, I look at a lot of the same, resources that you do, but just evaluating individual players has been a big development, right? The first few years in fantasy, I didn't know how to just look at a guy on Baseball Reference, right? I mean, that's my main source. I mean, I'm like a Rain Man type fantasy baseballer. I look at the stats and I look at the stats and I look at the stats and I look at the numbers over and over and over and over, repeatedly, but just looking at one player, looking at their minor league stats, right? Figuring out what can I expect from them in the major leagues. Like, just by their minor league stats. How many walks, how many stolen bases, and how many attempts, how many extra base hits, what's the batting average, all of that. I mean, that's been one of my biggest developments. So, but to go back to the hitting thing, okay, I don't know how if I stressed enough that you know, and just like with starting pitching volume, okay, you can never have enough hitting. Okay, this is a philosophy. This is a winning strategy. You can never have enough hitting. You can never have enough power. Is another word that you can throw in there, right? So, I mean, let me give you some examples of that and how you could build depth in your fantasy hitting in your fantasy baseball roster. Okay, so you know, let's think of let's go all the way back to the draft. Okay, let's say you're gonna draft, and yes, you want to have volume in your pitching. Well, I've seen as a strategy some people draft tons of hitters, right? And they have a bench that's 6 7 maybe even 8 players deep right on the offensive side, and then they go through this process throughout the season of whittling down who's really the truth is, you and I know this, is who is doing well that season, right? You can look at guys past production in fantasy baseball, and you can know kind of what to expect from them, right? But we know that over the course of a season or in one season at a time, people have good seasons, they have bad seasons. So that could play into like, okay, is this person like having a good season? Are they producing stats this season? And you go through this whittling down process. So, do you want to have a full pitching staff, a full functioning bullpen, and a starting rotation on week one? Yeah, that'd be great. That's ideal. But if you don't, focus on the hitting,
Actually,
whittle
Jay,
it down.
if you don't mind, I think you're hitting on a good point here. Whether you're talking about hitting or pitching, it's not about the roster that how it looks on opening day. It's how you evaluate the roster as the season goes along. I'm not gonna step in here, and I want you to continue on your hitting,
No,
but
no, go ahead.
I will say I'm gonna use a team in our league for example. If you look at the way funked up the roster is constructed, he's done what you said. He did it from the get go. He
Yes.
just stacked his offense, and he's had barely any pitchers. But the pitchers that he started the year off looked pretty good. So I think
Oh,
his
yeah.
strategy was to really hit it on the hitting side and just be efficient, adequate on the pitching side.
Yeah.
But the problem with this strategy is if you're going to use it, you got to follow through the whole season.
Yes.
And if you don't continuously churn and burn when some of these players don't work out, you lose value off the advantage that you gave yourself at the beginning.
Right.
I.e., when some of those starters that you thought were in your starting lineup day one that aren't producing, but you have the extra volume on the bench and you swap it out. If you don't get value for those starters before they lose, like I'm talking about hitters or pitcher, if you don't get value for someone that like, okay, everybody has a perceived value, right? That's why
Yeah.
we have preseason ranks.
Right.
So say guys like not performing to what we thought, but he's still performing. Well, there's a window to trade those players and to recoup value,
Yes.
or there's a window to gain value, but you have to be paying attention. And if you're going to start off with that's kind of an unbalanced roster to start by design because, well, let's look at your roster 2 years ago. You kind of did this, and then you picked up the pitching in the summer when you knew which hitters were going to be there for the long term, which hitters you wanted to flip. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I mean,
that-
and no, you're right, and you do have to. It's all this in-season management that goes into that too. Yes, and you have to be in fantasy baseball. You have to be able to play the hot hand. You sometimes have to give yourself the roster flexibility to be able to play the hot hand. So if you got five or you got 4 or 5 guys down there in the bench that, or you've got guys in your starting lineup that you think are must starts. Well, sometimes people emerge and become a must start. I mean, let's put a name out there. Ezekiel Duran is a must start type of guy right now. You got him on your roster. You got to find a way to get him in your lineup. And if you got all these other guys sitting around that you think are good but aren't currently performing, you got to figure out a way to get this guy into your lineup. You know what I mean? So it's just the depth thing. And how do you want to build depth in hitting? Okay, let's say you didn't do it right away either, but just how are you going to do it through acquisitions? And who are you going to keep on your roster, right? Who's worth rostering? Well, there's a few different ways you could look at it. One of the ways you could look at depth is you want those guys that are providing depth, you want your backups, let's call them backups, to be starters, okay? And let me explain that. Like, if I got someone that I want to substitute in when my star has a day off, well, I want them to be providing value. I want them to be let's call it starter value, because they're actually providing something like at least counting stats, right? They're, providing the counting stats or something. So and another way to think of it would be like, if you're starting your backup, you're putting your backup in and they're a starter, well then you're starting a starter. If you put in your backup and they're nothing but a backup player and they're not even good enough to start, you're starting a backup. You want the guy to be worthy. So, and let's say it's someone who is a platoon player, right? They don't play every day. Well, the way I would look at that is, if they don't play every day, when they play, are they providing that starter value? Are they playing that good? If they are, and they're that good, then they're worth having on your roster and they're worth substituting in. I've learned this the hard way about benching your stars, even when they don't play. If you have a guy like Bryce Harper on your fantasy team and you take him out of your lineup when he's on a day off, let me tell you, sometimes a pinch hit from Bryce Harper is worth more than a whole game from some scrub. I mean, how many times have I learned this? I have learned this lesson the hard way
we
sometimes.
play in a 16 team, as you said, 26-man roster deep league. Some of these so-called scrubs you're talking about are dependable players for us. I mean,
well,
come on.
A scrub is a scrub is a scrub. I'm just saying they're either good or they're either providing something or they're not.
You're giving me food for thought for a different conversation. I'm gonna let you keep going.
I mean, and so in order to have a bunch of pitchers down there, some teams are going to be trying to go with 1 or 2 man benches. But I think those days are over. I think that part of us having a 26-man roster was to help with the fact that the way that teams manage injuries now.
Let's be real, COVID.
Right, COVID
is what caused the 26.
Exaggerated it so much, but it really, the reality in baseball now is that guys get days off, they get rest days, they need to be healthy, and they are so conservative with injuries now that like you have to have some depth or you're going to be in trouble day to day. You're not going to be able to field a whole, team. So, I don't know. I mean, I've touched on a lot that I wanted to. I mean...
Anything else you want to add to it?
I mean, you brought up rankings again. I mean, it is honestly a big part of... I mean, I spend so much time in the off season before the season starts, 4, 6, 8 weeks, before. That's pretty much what I look at as rankings. I mean, Baseball Reference, rankings... I mean, it's really a big part.
To be able to rank a player, you have to have an adequate knowledge of their past performance, their current trends, and you have to be able to look under the hood.
Right.
I will be honest, until I entered this league, I wasn't really in the StatCast data or any of the underlying metrics. But that's what's fueling the fire right now in fantasy baseball. That's what you're running off
Yeah,
of.
it's definitely I'm being brought up, now it's like you have to look at cuz poor performance, you have to find a way to look at someone's poor performance and put it into perspective, right? You've got to know what the problem is with someone who's very highly ranked or you know, you got to be able to like figure out what is going on if they're just like basically getting unlucky. And that's pitchers or hitters. Like what is their like BABIP, stuff like that. I have really started to absorb, and it can become a part of. I could quickly look at that and say if okay, they're kind of getting unlucky on offense, or with and yeah, I mean, that's one example of it's starting to make its way into my day to day, how I could look at things. I think you're probably a little further along with some of the advanced metrics, but again, what I have done over and over and over and over and over is all the baseball reference stats. Everything that's there to look at for a person, their minor league career and major league career. And, unless you're Julio Rodriguez or Juan Soto, there's going to be big adjustments when people reach the major leagues.
Julio Rodriguez had to make some adjustments this year.
Yeah, for sure. So there's the once you've got a season or so under your belt, yeah, there's going to be some.
All right.
Now, I got to put you on the spot a little bit with winning strategies, and we can finish it up after this, but you've said before, and you've criticized teams for showing people their lineup in advance, right? And setting their lineup one day ahead. And I gotta push back on that one a little bit. And I used my team as an example, and I'm like, okay, my lineup might be set for today. Like, I just want you to look at that and you tell me, what are you going to do about that?
Okay, so
like,
look,
you're going to overreact to what someone's lineup is.
all right, look, we got to
making moves.
We got to put some masculinity out here. This is Father's Day weekend. So what Jay is referencing to is he's like, there's two ways you could do this. You can put your balls up on the table and say, look at this. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
Or you can be deceptive and say, I got respect for you. You probably think you can beat me, but you don't know what I'm going to do. And here's my pushback on this. I'll be honest. I like to fuck around with people's heads because if I can get in your head during our matchup, then it does give me a tangible advantage as far as making you second guess some of your roster moves. In the back of my mind, I know what I'm doing the whole way through. It's a chess match. Stitches talks about playing chess all the time. It's totally relatable to our game. I'm sorry for getting a little off topic here.
What better way to do that than to just set your lineup and let them do all the scrambling and moving around? Aren't you,
Because this is where we get caught, Jay. I'm so glad you said that. So we get caught up in players and drooling over players. We're going to go over some here in a minute. But the real game is in the statistics, the stat categories.
Absolutely.
So
the battlefields.
Yes. So here's my point exactly. So I'm playing Kick and Dirt this week, right? And I'm looking at the stats last night while some of the games are going on, and I was up at 1.8 to 6. I was like, oh, whatever, that's fine. And then a couple things happened, and I looked. I'm still up 8 to 6. But you know what? He had hit a home run and tied me in a home run. But I'm like, well, how's the score the same? I look, I got a double play ball. This is what people don't understand. We start drooling over all these players, but it's the little stats that count. So the simple fact that I may win, I may not. I'm not holding a huge fan. But my point is a double play ball hold just as much. Well, I should not say that because home run, you get a run, a hit.
Sure, but when you're way behind,
in the grand scheme of things,
in hits
when you're
and
chasing
runs,
categories,
yeah. It's going to change how you do
things. Exactly. So what I'm saying is by being deceptive with your decisions, it's making those guys who think they got the it factor for the roster. Do I really have the it factor for the roster?
If you don't
How,
produce any counting stats and nobody's
is
hitting
it
any runs in or
or
scoring any runs, then no,
or
you don't.
the other thing
Yeah.
is it your B week? Because if it's your B week, then maybe you're second guessing yourself the whole time.
Sure. Dude, oh man. I mean, it's there, I have far less insecurities than I used to as a young manager, right? But it's hard, and you got to be able to adjust. You can't just it can't be static. Not in our league.
No, no. Guys, I feel like we're sharing too much of our strategies. But so thank you so much for listening to this ramble. I really hope that you guys enjoy listening to us ramble, because we sure enjoy rambling.
Now, next time we might have to talk a little bit about how we look at our lineups, because you and I always go back and forth on that. I mean, we don't have to do it now, but
I think that's a good thought.
because I think there's 10 or 15 minutes there of
Yeah.
because you always force me to look at mine in a different way, but it really I think we're similar. It's just we do think of it a little bit differently in terms of how we look at your offensive lineup.
This is why we make a great team. Different minds come together.
You
Makes
always
for great content.
It does.
Who wants? It's like in life, you don't want to like marry yourself, right?
Right.
Like you don't want to be like everybody thinking alike.
Right.
I always say this. I hesitate to say it, but I always say it sounds simple, but if I'm seeing too many people zigging, I've got to zag.
I get that.
Because you got to have an advantage, and
I've definitely tried to internalize that strategy. I've tried a little bit more to think of it that way. Like, am I zigging when everyone else is zagging? And I really think it can be super beneficial and helpful. But yeah, I thought everyone was just gonna kiss my butt and just think exactly like I did. What are you talking about?
Jay, I think you're talking about the dream scenario of, oh my God, I've got the it team. I'm just gonna roll through the season.
Yeah.
Put my roster out there. You're gonna look at it, Jay. You're having a good week. Let's talk about the happenings in the league.
All right,
this is a good
let's
segue
move to
into
the
this.
league.
So I want to start off with your team, but I'm not going to specifically talk about your team the whole time. You just gave me a good transition point. So Jay built this roster to be exactly that. Look at it. What are you going to do? And he gave up a lot to do that. And as we currently stand, he's less than 500 league play. However, I'm looking at your team. You're having a great week. Let's see how you finish it.
Yeah, it's starting to roll a little bit. The train's starting to roll a little bit now, I feel.
You're playing in a division where nobody's really taking the bull by the horns yet. So you've got a chance to just take the bull by the horns with your division with a couple of strong weeks. This is good content because we're midway through the season. As I'm looking at the league standing, we're going to go down here. And we're going to go back and forth like when we did our mock draft. I'm going to reel off these teams from the order that they're in the standings right now. And I realize it was based off the way the week ended this past Sunday night. We're going to go back and forth. I'm going to start, and then you're going to go next with the next team. And we're simply going to say contender or pretender. Now, we can do this because we've got data to back this up. And if there's some tangible argument points, we'll do that after we finish this off. But here's the thing. When we say contender, we don't mean we think you're going to win it or we think that you're looking like you've got a strong chance to win it. When I say contender, I mean, do you have a chance to win your division? Do you have a chance to be in the playoffs? I shouldn't say chance. Do you have a strong chance to be in the playoff? Do you have a
Right.
chance to win your division? And do you have the roster where you could foresee winning a match or two in the playoffs? I feel like that's
Yeah.
so therefore you would have a chance to win. So I feel like taking all those into consideration, that would be a contender. There are some teams that aren't out of it, but I would label them as pretenders. But that's just me. Jay may think differently, and that's why
Sure.
we're going to go back and forth. Do you have anything you want to add to that definition before we go through these?
No, I mean you're right. It's in terms of winning in the playoffs. Like it's like we've said this on one of the other podcasts. I mean it's just like real life baseball. It's whoever is healthy and right, and whoever is going good, and whoever is hitting well or whatever is who's going to win in the playoffs. And I've learned, over the years, like that the people that get you to the playoffs aren't always the ones that help you win in the playoffs. Like you've got to be nimble. You got to keep making moves. I mean, if I'm looking at that number of moves for each team, might be telling about, you know, whether we can expect them to continue or whether their good streak is going to come to an end.
I
If they
will.
don't keep making moves.
I will say, like every year, I'm leading in transactions.
Yes.
However,
Yes, I noticed
if you
that.
watch me, I've been a bit more conservative this year. Usually I'm leading in transactions by like 50 plus.
I got to give Backcountry kudos for
Yeah.
all those moves,
Yeah.
because he's kept the ball rolling the whole time, and so,
So let's get to this, Jay. Contender versus pretender, part 2. Uh, we'll start with number 1, Eagle Ridge. I don't have anything else to say other than the fact that, well, we all know he is a contender.
yeah.
All right, Jay. Currently, I'm sitting second.
What? Oh yeah. I mean, Eagle Ridge.
No. We're going back and forth. Eagle Ridge is a
Oh,
contender.
oh, okay.
Number 2 right now in the standings currently is me. Am I a contender or a pretender? I know it's weird. You're not gonna hurt my feelings, Jay.
I'm gonna say you're a contender. I mean, I wasn't a believer going into the season, but as usual, you have made some trades and made some moves, and if I look at your rotation, there's a couple guys in there that might be a little bit of a question mark, but overall, I mean, I definitely think that you have the depth, and that with pitching at that, and that can continue, that you can continue to compete and probably win in a lot of the pitching categories week in and week out. I mean, look how many guys that you have that are going good. Can Zach Eflin continue to do what he's been doing? I don't know. I'm not. You were big on him, I think, going into the season. I think you knew something there, and it's working out. I mean,
Yeah, you made
Marcus
that
Stroman.
pick for me.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Stroman is going good. I think that can continue. I mean, he's always been a workhorse. He's always been a high innings guy and thrown a lot of innings, just ate up innings. So I love that depth. Your offense. I mean, I'm looking at your offense, and the complexion of it has changed a little bit over the last few weeks. There's a couple names in there that weren't there before. So
That's always the case.
right. Teo Hernandez, Whit Merrifield.
I appreciate you saying that I'm a contender. Like I said, had you said I'm a pretender, it wouldn't have bothered me one bit. This is the part of the exercise, We're gonna hurt some people's feelings here. It's okay. So we'll move on to number 3 on this list right now. Currently standing is Imperial. Okay, Imperial is a contender, and Imperial is my dark horse sleeper to win the whole thing. Why is Imperial a dark horse? Because he's always in the same division as his brother. And I also feel like he's a dark horse because if you look at the way his roster is constructed, Jake always has a powerful offense, but this year, he's got the pitching to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he's going to be a very tough out in the playoffs, as always. One thing that just kills me is, well, two things stand out with his roster. And he got Josh Lowe from me after the first week of the season we played. And I knew at the time I shouldn't have done it, but I caved in thinking, well, chances are he's not going to pan out. And I got a pick and a reliever I really wanted for him. But Josh Lowe is having a heck of a year.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, this may get a little salty, but do you realize there was a transaction where Gunnar Henderson at his lowest point was traded for Matt Mervis, who is now completely unrosterable?
Yeah.
You know who made that trade? Stitches traded Gunnar Henderson to Imperial for Matt Mervis. Correct me if I'm wrong. There may have been other pieces to that trade. I don't remember.
You know
I'm
who I
going
went
off
out and
memory.
got in my other league with Matt Mervis? Michael Conforto. Oh, God, I'm so happy about that. I don't have him in this league, but that would be Jake.
So, anyways, Jake is a contender.
Totally agree. He started the season with some of these starting pitchers. He's like stuck to his guns. I mean, not that there was any reason not to, but yeah, things are looking really good for Jake right now.
Jay, tell us about Stitches. He's currently fourth. He a contender or is he a pretender?
You know, I marveled at what Stitches has been able to do in the first half of the season in terms of regular season record. But I got to say, I think Stitches is a pretender right now. I think he's got a lot of work to do to have a roster that's going to be going well towards the end of the season to make a strong run for the playoffs. I mean, there's going to be a lot of competition in his division. You've got Redbird, who we've said things about before, good things, and you've got Cajun, who is not out of it. He's not having a good week this week, and
Not having a good year so far.
right, but. I think right now Stitches is a pretender. I think that there's some work to be done there.
I will say in Stitch's favor, he's got the managerial flexibility, meaning he's going to make the moves as he sees
Absolutely.
fit. And his pitching is going to give him a chance to at least tread water when his hitting is not doing well. But gotcha. Okay, so midway point of the season, Stitches looks like he has some work to do. All right, so that means we go to number 5. And number 5, oh, this one's an easy one.
But guess who's winning 12-0 right now?
Number 5.
108 Stitches.
I saw that before you said that. I wasn't going to say anything. Number 5 is Bird Law. You know, I got to go back to what you just said. It's good that you point that out. It's so frustrating to look at stats on Saturday morning, like the scores. You know these scores aren't going to hold. They're going to change.
It is incredible how many big leads evaporate over the course of every week. And that is the norm. I mean, you would think I would realize this after this many years, but how many of those big leads evaporate and things even out over the course of a week? And you realize that it's kind of all about the weekend, right? Like Friday, Saturday, Sunday means a lot, especially with hitting. I mean, with anything, but with hitting, it's like, okay, I got these guys hitting all weekend long. And, you know, it takes a while to figure out, like, I think studying real life teams, like how they give guys days off and rest and when they do and don't. And I think your studs are playing all weekend long typically. I think they're getting their days off during the week typically.
That's a good point. So that's why it's
The
crunch time
weekend's
on the
very
weekend.
important. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Number 5 on this list is easy. Me is Bird Law. We will talk about players a little bit. We promised to. Let's talk about Corbin Carroll. This guy, okay.
been salivating over this
oh
guy
my gosh.
since before
Okay.
the season even started. And it was so sad to know that like he was gonna keep Corbin Carroll, and I had no chance.
I've tried
of
so
drafting,
hard
of
to
drafting him.
acquire him. I still probably will.
I was hoping that he would have enough other good keepers that he would somehow not keep him. But Birdlaw was smart enough to realize that.
Oh, he was going to keep him from the get-go.
Yeah.
If you listen to, here's another source for you. If you listen to Chris Walsh of Prospect One in the offseason, Walsh is the prospect guru for the podcast people. And he regularly frequents the CBS Sports Today podcast. But in the offseason, like when you're looking for content, I encourage you in November and December, or at least late October, November, and early December, to listen to his content because he literally has a beat on all those prospects, lower level, mid level, high level, whatever. And he lives down there in Arizona, and that's what he does. But he's a Diamondbacks homer, obviously, and they love Corbin Carroll.
So,
and I gotta tell you, Corbin Carroll, people think, for his small stature, his power's not going to hold up. Here's the thing. He uses all fields. If you look at his spray charts, his home runs are evenly distributed between left and right. Like, he's not straight up going pull heavy. This guy and a couple others
I guess
are probably going to year in and year out frequent the top 5 of fantasy rankings.
He's going to wiggle around in that batter's box, and he's going to flaunt that beautiful long hair, and he's going to spray that ball all over the field. Has your Arizona guy that you're listening to, has he explained why the Diamondbacks have all these vertically challenged guys on their roster? Is there a reason for that?
Go ahead, Jay, if you want to.
No. That's the only knock on him and the Diamondbacks is like most of them are vertically challenged. So, but there's I got
for the record,
I'm
when you say vertically challenged, you are implying to their physical stature.
Yes, their physical stature is not big and imposing, but I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter all that much.
There's something growing out there in the desert. They're leading that division.
You know what I think is that in baseball, we have gone through all these transitions where, all these hitters were being, some people, it messes with their, I think, whole career to have their swing changed, for us to be worried about exit velocity and hitting fly balls, right? And elevating the baseball and hitting for power, hitting home runs. So, I feel like we've gone through all these transitions, and what's come out of it is and even the best hitters. Look at Joey Votto. Joey Votto is an incredible hitter. He can do anything he wants to in that batter's box. But what he did for the betterment of his team and their ability to score runs. Sometimes he took walks, but what he did was try to hit for power, try to elevate the baseball. And he was willing to let that batting average go down to try to be a little more aggressive up there sometimes. Sometimes maybe taking the walk wasn't what he needed to do for his team. You can see hitters do it, but my point is the guys that don't have the physical stature, I'm going to bring up Brian Reynolds as an example, okay? Dude, how do these guys, there's an approach that some of these guys have that they are fast to the baseball. I think it's bat speed. It's loading up for power. The way that boom.
They're using their body as leverage.
Exactly. And there's a way that some of these guys can do it with so much skill, so much knowledge, that they can do kind of everything, but they are not a big guy. And I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how some of these guys are doing it. And there's other guys that I could think about that their swing kind of resembles um, a guy like Brian Reynolds.
Well, yeah, I think year in and year out, baseball's the one sport that's going to turn these specimens of all different kinds into
Yes,
productive players. You don't have to be a
I
top
love
notch
that.
athlete to play baseball.
Love that. And it
But
may not go on forever. You know what I'm
no,
saying? It
yes,
changes. And, you know, I mean, the second base position is one of those places where you see guys like that. I mean, think about Dan Ugla. He
oh
was
my
like the
God,
best. He was a top 10 fantasy baseball player for several years, and then they just completely
yeah,
fall
but
off the face of
Dan
the earth.
Uglo was like low average, high
Right,
power,
right.
and
But
yes,
how
you're
did he
right.
keep the average up? I mean, it'd be interesting to go back and look because he did for a while. Then
He
it
had a
falls
very
off.
unique batting stance, if I remember correctly. A lot of his power came from his hip up because he would sit really low in the bat. We're going off topic here. We got to get back. I'm sorry, guys. We love baseball here. So Bird Law is a contender without a shadow of a doubt. Jay, numbers. We got to get things moving along here because I want to get to the whole standings, but. Redbird is sitting at 6. I think. What do you think?
You know, I think that he's working on filling that infield out. He's got some prospects there. He's got Ezekiel Tavar, Nolan Gorman, Miguel Vargas, Jeremy Pena. I mean, there's a lot of question marks there. I think that it probably rests on his ability to kind of fill that part of his lineup out. I think we're starting to see things kind of normalize with Nolan Gorman. I mean, so Nolan Gorman is batting 189 over the last 30 days. He does
Yeah.
have 5 home runs, OPS 638. You know, things are normalizing there, and I'm starting to see that there's a little bit of a hole in the middle of that infield.
Yeah, the strength of his team is definitely Rosarina, Luis Robert, Acuna, and Eloy Jimenez.
Right.
And the outfield, which is pretty good as
He's
long as they
waiting
all
for
stay
maybe
healthy. And
Rendon to get back in there.
I don't think Rendon's going to. I've cheered for that guy for so long. I just think it's another bad contract the Angels gave out.
It's another example of a guy with not a big stature that was producing all kinds of
Well, I
power
think
and
there was something in the
RBIs.
water in Washington, those couple years. Bryce Harper, Steven Strasburg,
Ryan
uh,
Zimmerman.
Ryan Zimmerman, Anthony Rendon, Victor Robles flashed some pan for a while. A
Yeah.
lot of those guys aren't. I mean, Bryce Harper's side. A lot of those. Oh, Patrick Corbin. A lot of those guys were household names have not either aged well or just have fallen off completely. And
I got
I don't know
wise
what's
with,
up.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to get into the tangible parts of that. But so is Redbird a contender or a pretender?
I think he's still a contender. I think his roster is his rotation is looking pretty good right now. So I believe in his ability to compete week in and week out right now and even get better in the coming weeks.
Okay, and that moves us along. Okay, so currently, right now, Bat Country holds 7th place in Division One. Okay, all right. So this is where it gets dicey. I I don't think Backcountry is going to win that division. However, he has done an amazing job of taking advantage of a division that has just not gotten its footing yet. And we pegged him the 13th best team in the league to begin the year. And rightfully so, he won it last year, and he didn't have a lot of assets to start the year.
Yep.
But kudos to him, he's done well. Now the good comment aside, I think he's a pretender. I think he's not going to contend for the title. That's not to say I can't see a scenario where he makes the playoff.
Sure.
I do. I do
Oh,
see a
absolutely.
scenario where he makes the playoff.
I
I
agree.
just don't think he's a contender to win the whole thing.
Right.
And that takes us to number 8, shirtless Ron Gant. You know, yeah, shirtless Ron Gant. What do you think, John?
Shirtless,
Getting kind of dicey here.
well, shirtless, like he's arrived in a way where, I'm not sure if he showed this kind of, I don't want to call it dominance because he's kind of right around 500, but, pretty solid lineup right now. Lots of young talent, which I really like right now. I just salivate over Tyler Stevenson in the catcher position. God, I'd love to have
Stevenson.
you don't see it.
No,
He plays every single day.
but
Number
he's
one,
got middling exit velocities, and he just hits in a bandbox. But the thing is, he doesn't produce what we want him to produce. I've never rostered him.
talk about physical stature. Have you seen that guy at the plate? He's a monster.
But
He's huge.
he should be doing better for himself than he has over the course of the last 3 years. We get caught up in that stuff, but
Yeah.
he's got
I
the
think there's-
ballpark factor in his side.
Yeah. I think there's an
adjustment. I
adjustment.
just don't get your Tyler Stevenson bromance.
Well, I like the playing every day, and it gives you roster flexibility that you got somebody in there every day. You don't have to roster 2 catchers, which I know a lot of people don't anyways. I'm one of the few that I tend to more often than not have 2 catchers. But anyways, to go back to the young talent, you got Spencer Steer, De La Cruz, Ian Happ.
Ellie.
I don't know if we can call him young anymore. He's kind of in the middle. He's
So-
right in his prime.
So I'm
Kellenic,
I'm sorry,
Kyle
I gotta interrupt you here.
all right.
A source in this league, I was going back and forth with, not to be named,
Okay.
mentioned that he turned down a first round pick for LA De La Cruz. Okay, so let's have a little fun with this. All right, we're not gonna do a deep dive. We don't have enough time for this, but the fantasy baseball world has gone nuts over the last 2 to 3 years over those premium prospects coming up. Why? I think part of it is because they're coming up younger.
Yeah.
Because incentives in baseball have been made to stop the withholding of players down,
Right.
which unfortunately is still happening in some
Sure.
places, but not nearly as frequently as it was. Second of all, though, we've seen a lot of prospects hit the scene and succeed right away. So I was going back and forth with this source, and it was interesting to me. What's the difference between Ellie De La Cruz and O'Neal Cruz and Joe Adele as far as when they were coming up? O'Neal Cruz more recently was last year. Joe Adele's obviously the bottom out factor. There's still hope for him.
Yeah.
But what the similarities, all 3 of those guys have just amazing power, like raw exit velocities. And so if you listen to some of these podcasts, they go nuts over these guys. My thing is he really better than a first round pick? Or is Ellie De La Cruz a first round pick next year?
I mean,
I think he'll be a keeper, but if he wasn't,
I think that, a lot of it, so he's got let's call it the pedigree, even though he's only 21 years old and he doesn't have a bunch of minor league seasons for us to look at. It's more like winter league and these different, leagues, but he's got a great batting average. On base percentage is looking good. OPS, over 900, over 1,000 for most of these seasons. He's got the stolen bases. So, what's the difference? Well, number one, his batting average is going to be better than O'Neal Cruz's, just looking at it
You think you're projecting?
I'm projecting that because of the past and what we're
O'Neal
seeing in
Cruz
the major
does a lot
leagues.
that we haven't seen.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of development there that could happen that I could be singing a different song after, O'Neal Cruz has got some major league seasons under his belt. But I don't know what the difference is, but I can tell you that I don't blame him in many ways for not taking a first round pick for this guy because I had, somebody else in the league was like, we were talking about young talent, and I was like, okay, well, I kind of did that in a way, but I'm like, I got to keep getting younger and finding that young talent. And they're like, go after De La Cruz. And I knew the second he said that, I was like, I bet you there's nothing I could throw at this guy right now that's going to make him trade him.
Very good point.
I don't blame him.
Very good point. So is he a contender or a pretender?
Like I said, he's kind of arrived. And I think he's a contender right now. I think he's got all this young talent that can continue to produce all throughout the season. I think Hap's going to hopefully continue to go pretty good. And later in the season, if De La Cruz gets a full look, he's going to still be doing this in August and September.
Good point. All right, so moving along to number 9. Oh, Jay, that's you. Jay, I'll be honest. From the get-go, you tried to do that balls on the counter, look at my freaking offense, like, how are you going to deal with this? And it's underwhelmed until the last couple of weeks. Here you are, you're coming along. But I, as well as a lot of other people know, you've got to be the odds-on favorite to win your division. I really think you still are. I know. I'm not trying to praise you, but you've got the roster to win the whole thing. If your pieces fall together, you just had some really rough stretches to start the year. We'll see how it shakes out, but I think you are a contender. You've got enough pitching, even though it's your weaker side. You've gotten better, much better. And you definitely got the offense that if they start hitting on all cylinders, there's not going to be many people in this league that can contend with it. So for the better part of the league, hopefully your offense doesn't start hitting on all cylinders, but it could.
Hit is the key word. Like the number of hits, and like I've had so many days with like 3 hits. These like 3 for 31 days. I mean, I've had more of those this season than I can remember, man. And the counting stats haven't been there, but they're starting to come.
Listen to some of these podcasts, guys. You'll learn that they did stuff. They do stuff to the baseballs to where the offensive environment in April and May is colder than the rest of the summer month. Man, this is food for another conversation. But we could talk about in Double-A. They're experimenting with tacked balls. We all heard about the Goldilocks ball last year and how amazingly Yankee Stadium was the house for most of the Goldilocks balls. And then somehow Aaron Judge hit 60-some home runs. I think the dude's got the power to do that year in, year out.
They should have.
My thing is, I know I'm going off on a tangent. It's going to put me out there for people to criticize me. But I'm just going to go ahead and say it. How can you keep somebody like Barry Bonds out of the Hall of Fame just because he may or may not have used steroids at some point? And a time and age where a lot of them were doing it, but yet you're going to celebrate Aaron Judge when baseball specifically doctored the baseballs and put more of those balls in certain places. There is evidence of it. There's articles that have been written about it. And somehow, if you want more evidence, how does Garrett Cole, I'm not saying he's always the best pitcher, but consistently over the last 3 to 5 years, he's been one of the best pitchers. All of a sudden, his home run rate spikes last year. Lots
ERA
of suspicion there.
Going way
Lots
up.
of suspicion there.
There's other examples of that too, I mean, So Carlos Ordona's been out with injuries. So, but we need a bigger sample size to
Yeah,
see what
yeah.
his stats look
I'm
like
making
over a season
implications that
or
are gonna
two.
get me in
Well,
trouble.
I
So,
think the Yankees need to bring Tom Brady back out of retirement so they can really and have him be Yankee so they can really get really good at cheating. He could show them some things, I'm sure, about the balls.
look, hey, for the record, I'm not saying Judge or the Yankees are cheating. I'm saying MLB has done stuff to change the game to make it easier for certain players versus other players. If you're not all playing with the same ball, it's not a level playing field. The whole argument against the keeping all those steroid guys out is they're playing on a different level of playing field that wasn't fair. Give them an advantage. MLB's giving certain teams of players, depending on whichever baseball they were pitching or hitting with last year, that's not a level playing field. So
And the fans were so naive. I didn't even realize like what really is happening in baseball, and I've had to like redefine what cheating is because you really have to come full circle with, you know, the sign stealing and everything. I mean, of course it's always been a part of baseball. Like you can't just give your signs away and they're going to get stolen, and that's not cheating. But it was with all the cameras and everything, obviously, and the drum beating.
we
But
can. We're really getting on
I
base
know
here.
you don't want me to get up.
We gotta stop. We gotta finish the sixth, right, Jay?
I'm just saying I was so naive, and now I'm willing to look at all of this with like fresh eyes, and let's just be honest about it, because the whole, some of the cheating stuff, the most recent ones, it kind of shook my faith a little bit, and it hurt my fandom a little bit, but I've got it back. I got it back after all the cheating scandals.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. No, you're okay, man. It's good content for future episodes. You got a couple of couple of passionate.
Can I say
advocates.
something
Go
since
for
we're
it.
talking about my team? Is Ryan McMahon.
Oh, God.
This is the reason that that
can't
Luke
quit.
doesn't trade. This is the perfect example of like why these guys don't trade as much, because and Luke is always like, he's kind of
I thought we were talking
top.
to your team.
We are, but I have Ryan McMahon on my team now, and Luke traded him to me for a mid to low draft pick. The point I'm trying to make is, you looking at a player like it's like a stock. It's like owning a stock. Mm-hmm. And selling low is just asking for someone to come along and get them for nothing. But what are you going to do? I mean, obviously, so... and Luke, like, he's, like, educated me in the past of, like, thinking of them as, like, a stock. And, like, you might as well just hold on to them until they're just droppable. Because you're getting ripped off in some of these trades. And, like, it's not, it's not ripping off. Everybody has to take a chance. I was able to take a chance and take a risk. And it's worked out.
I think,
of course, I'm a contender.
You are a contender. I'm sorry. Did I not answer that?
No, I don't know. Yeah.
Jay's team, Pack, is a contender.
Yeah.
Now, we're running out of time here. We still got 7 teams, and 10 through 16 is standings. So I'm going to rattle all these teams off, but I'm going to rattle them off in order, and we're not going to really talk much about them. We're just going to say, is there any in this bunch that you view as a contender right now? Because these are the teams that are either weren't expected to perform or just aren't performing, but they're in the bottom half of the standing. So in 10th place we got Isotopes. In 11th place currently we got Funked Up. In 12th place is Hitman. 13th place is Cajun. 14th place is Pokes. 15th excuse me, guys. 15th place is Paleskins, and 16th, rounding out the league right now, is Kicking Dirt. Now, I know in this group of 7, there's some serious contenders that we thought were... serious teams that we thought were contenders to start the year off, but we have data now. We're halfway through the year. Jay, I think I see a couple of paths to the playoff for a couple of these teams. I
Yes.
really do. But I don't see any contender for the championship in this group. Do you?
I don't think so. I agree with you. I think Isotopes is kind of up against it, but I definitely can see a path to the division or the playoffs for him. Um, he is, as we speak, I think, trying to shift and move and making some, developing his rotation, filling that out. And I think you might not think by looking at it, but I think with his offense, like he's got a chance to compete week in
He
and week
does.
out
He
and
plays
make the
into the
playoffs, and the division is up for grabs.
exactly.
So,
And then one more thing I want to note with these teams before we sign off here is I feel like in my eyes the most disappointing team this year so far has to be Cajun. I really strongly felt like he was the front runner to win our division to start the year off. Not to say that he can't go on a run. A couple of years ago, he went on a run and snuck in the playoff. I do see an avenue for that, but this division's pretty tough, and he's almost 30 games back, which is not a good thing at this point in the year.
well,
He's just had some underperforming.
yeah,
The St. Louis
Goldschmidt and
Cardinals,
Arenado, yeah,
namely.
and the Cardinals, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, that's been a big part of it, and obviously those guys could show up in a big way. Yelich has been really good for him. Hopefully that can continue. Hopefully for him that can continue.
Jay, this has been a great show.
Yeah,
It's been fun.
it's exciting. So pretty soon we're gonna be
In Cincinnati.
on
2 weeks.
July 1st.
2 weeks from today.
So hopefully we are going to have a podcast for you guys with several different managers from the Fantasy Premier League.
We're
So
going to try. We'll see how this works out.
I'm sure we can do it.
There's gonna be
some glasses clinking.
I was going to say
and
there's going to be some
some
beer
background
drinking.
noise. But, as I've said, this whole thing, this podcast is fulfilling the dream of me for being like an AM radio person, and I've always wanted to do podcasts in the back of a Hardee's or some kind of Chili's. We'll be like the people on The Office.
Don't know why you do this, Jay, but it's okay. We all have our little quirk. I promise you, I will fulfill your dream. We will do a podcast from the back of a Hardee's at some point. I don't know when, but we'll do it.
Right. And it'll be fairly quiet. There might be some other 90-year-old men talking in the background. It's just a sports radio thing. It's just like an AM radio
I
thing.
remember where nurses hope those 9-year-old men have a heart attack because they're congesting all that cholesterol.
Right.
Well,
we have good Samaritan laws in Indiana that we can definitely act and save lives out there with not impunity, but we can feel empowered to go out there and try to save some lives.
I mean, that's the whole point, right?
Right. Yeah. So, quick health lesson, right? But yeah, save a life.
Save a life, drink a beer, have fun.
And be well.
All right, so this is the Fantasy Baseball Advocate signing off. Happy Father's Day, guys.
Be well.